Hi everybody, it's Karen from Scrappy Connect Studios and I'm here today for Crafting Kimmy to share with you a little coloring demonstration using this adorable Rapunzel stamp from the Once Upon a Time 3 set. So I'm going to show you two things today, a little bit of coloring of the skin, just kind of how I go about doing that, and then of course coloring her hair up too. All right, so let's start out with the colors that I'm going to be using for the skin tone. These are my go-to colors. So I always start with E00, and then for my shadows, E11, E13, and then for the cheeks, a little bit of R20. So I'm going to start out with my lightest tone, so that's E00. And basically, I'm just going to lay down this color over the entire skin surface that I'm going to be working on. So I just always go around the edges first and then just color in using the tip of my markers. So, and just make sure, it's okay if you have a few white spaces here and there. Don't worry about that because you're going to do some blending afterwards. And we'll just get all these little spots in here in our fingers. Perfect. Okay, so now I'm going to go back in now with my E11, and I'm going to lay this down anywhere I want some shadows. So I always start around her hairline, and just with kind of the tip of my marker, I'm going to go in there. And then I'm going to just kind of really lightly and with a really thin line, just add the little bit of a shadow in here. And don't worry about the harsh line because we're going to come out and we're going to blend that in a little bit afterwards. So again, I've got my light coming in this way. I don't worry about that too much, but it does give me a little bit of a sense. I do a little bit of a shadow around her nose as well, and then just under her chin. I like her nose to look a little bit lighter, kind of the bridge of the nose, but you don't need to do that. There's no one way to do this. This is just kind of the way that I typically go about coloring one of Cheryl's images. So add some shadows here on her fingers and then on the outside edges of each of her arms, just to give them kind of that round look. And now I'm going to go back in with that same E00, so my base color again. And just using kind of circular motions, I'm just going to blend in that shadow line. This is really the only blending I'm going to do with my skin tones, especially on such a small image. I'm just going to blend this out. And you'll notice that I'm not laying any of this color over her bridge of her nose. I'm just leaving that the way that it was. And we'll just go and blend that in here and over her arms as well. The arms are pretty skinny, so it's hard to kind of do that circular motion there. So I just kind of blend it in, just using some straighter lines too. It's not a big deal. Okay, so now I'm going to use E13, and this is quite a dark shadow for kind of the skin tone. So I'm only going to tiny thin lines in just a few spots, mostly just around the outside edge of her face and kind of underneath this hair just to make it pop. And on the far side of the light source, and of course, anywhere where something might drape over top of her arm, like the hair or the sleeve, I'm going to add a little bit of an extra shadow there. Now this is a little bit too dark for me, so I'm just going to blend this out a little bit. It looks, don't be worried because it'll look a little bit darker now than it will once you have all your hair color and stuff in too. So don't worry about that too much, but it looks a little better. Okay, now I'm going to use the R20. This is my favorite blushing color. And I'm just going to go in on her cheeks. Now her face is actually looking off to the side. So one of the cheeks you're not going to actually see much of because it's kind of turned to the side. And then one of them is really kind of right almost in the middle. And I just dabbed this kind of in a round motion. Now you're going to say, well, she looks a bit like a clown at this point, and she does. So I just take the E00 again, and just around the outside edge of that color, I just blend it outwards. And this will just soften it and actually just blend it right into the skin tone, just like that. I'm going to add just a tiny bit more of the blush just right to the middle of the blush color. So that was the R20 again, and there you have it. Her skin color's all finished and ready to go. Okay, so here's the fun part. Now we're going to color up her hair. These are the colors that I'm going to use. YR31 is my favorite base color for any kinds of blondes or brunettes. Then I'm going to use E13, E15, and E17, and those are going to give me kind of a really nice, warm brunette kind of color, blondie kind of brunette color. All right, so let's start with this YR31. Now this is my base color. Think of this as your highlight color if you're going to kind of try it kind of the same way that I do it here. And it's going to be your lightest tone. So if you think about where the light might be hitting the hair, this would be the color that you're going to see there. So I actually lay this color down completely over the hair surface. It I love this color for hair. I use this when I'm doing kind of a redhead type of color. I even use it kind of when I'm doing more of a gray kind of brown, more a dark brunette color. It really warms up the hair color, and I just think it's such a pretty shade. So you can see that as I'm coloring in here, I'm just trying to fill up most of the space. I'm not worried about direction, but I am kind of trying to follow the hairline. It gives me a bit of practice. When I add the next layers, I'm really going to want to kind of focus on following the line of the hair. And Cheryl's done a good job, the artist, of drawing in some lines to help me kind of visualize how the hair would be flowing. And I'm just kind of getting a little bit of practice on that as I lay down this color here. Some of the corners are trickier than others. Some of it will be kind of easy, but laying down the color that way really helps. All right, so now I'm gonna go to my next darkest tone, which is my E13. And oh, you can see I just dripped when I opened my marker, so we'll have to color over that later. But I'm going to start here on the part line. This is my favorite place to start when I'm coloring hair. If you think about hair and it kind of comes out, and every place that it comes out, it's going to be catching the light. So the darker places like the part line and around the edges of the hair that are kind of curving back or curving under, all of those are going to be darker. So I'm just going to take this darker tone just with the tip and kind of as lightly as I can, just kind of outline the edge of the hair shape and then add a bit of definition into the different strands of the hair. Again, really light touch with my marker here. These are really small areas to color in, and you can always add more color later, but it's hard to take it away. So I always kind of go with the whole less is more on my first time through. So coming up from the dress here, so this is one of those curvy pieces of hair. So as it kind of comes out over top of her arm, it should be catching the light a little bit more. So I'm going to feather in that darker color on the edges and now color this piece of hair that is actually behind her arm in completely in with the darker shade. And then as I come up around this corner, so this corner here would probably not be catching the light until it kind of comes up over top of her arm again. So we'll add in some more dark color and then we'll come down from the top here. And then of course, you know, as the hair is coming down out of her hand, it would be quite dense there. So you're going to get lots of darkness in that crease. And then same here as it's kind of clumping together at the bottom. And then just with really light strokes, just kind of flicking my marker downwards and outlining the edge again to give that idea of the hair kind of curving around away from the light. All right, so let's go back and do the other side now. So same thing, I'll just start on the outside and then the part line that I've kind of highlighted in here. And I think I'm going to try to make this look like the hair's a bit folded there. So I'm going to take that darkness all the way out to the edge. Hopefully that'll look like she kind of has some bangs kind of draped over top. All right, and now we're going to kind of create this definition here between the hair that's kind of going behind and the hair that's coming in front. So this whole section here that's behind her arm, this would all really be darker. And then Cheryl's created a bit of a wave here by having the hair kind of come in. So I've added a bit of darkness just down into that kind of where the little bump is. I'm really going to kind of fill this in with some darkness, going just kind of around the edge of her arm to make it really look like her arm is on sitting on top of that hair and there's quite a bit of shadow there. And you can see every once in a while I lift my marker up off of the image, and that's really just so that I can have a look and take a quick glance. I find the quick glances are really helpful because they give me a sense of what's working and what's not. Sometimes if I stare at the image for too long, nothing seems to make sense anymore. So the quick glances work for me. So this, I think, needs to be a bit darker. This hair is all behind her shoulder, so it really shouldn't be catching too much of the light back here. So we'll leave a little bit of a highlight there, but that's about it. And then we'll come in here, coming from behind the dress. Now this hair would be quite far back, so I want to create quite a bit of depth. So I'm going to go with quite a bit of color coming in from the back of her dress here, and then around these corners or curves, and on the edges as well. Again, really light touch, just kind of flicking. Less is more. You can always add more color, but it's really hard to take it away. So there we go. And again, more color around the outside edge of the hair, more of the darkness around the outside edge of the hair will give that more realistic look. Okay, so now I'm going to go in with my E15. And you know, this third color, I think it's beautiful just with the two colors that we've got going on here. But I think this one's just going to make the whole image really pop and give this hair a lot of life. So with this one, really light touch, just kind of going in everywhere I did the E13, just not as far down, if that makes any sense. So you can see most of the time when I work with my marker, I flick downwards. There's a few sections like in here that I do work upwards, but I like to flick downwards. That's just the most comfortable movement for me. So everywhere I'm going to put in this E15, it's just not going to go as far as I did with my E13 over top of that YR31. And of course, back in here, anywhere I have a shadow line, I'm just going to sketch that in with the tip around all of the edges here. And again, trying to really kind of get some contrast here with the layers of color and trying to define this little wave that we've got going here. So add a bit of depth and color in there and to this section of hair that's behind her body. And then just a tiny bit of color coming out of the tip here, and of course in the section that's behind. You can see how the one strand, in the front is really starting to pop out over top of the one that's behind. And down around here. We've got this nice bright section on this kind of thick piece of hair. Lots of the highlights still showing there. I love that. And then coming out from behind the dress again. And you can see I'm using quite a bit of the dark color here too, and in the corners, and then around the tip as well. Like how that's coming along. So just a couple of things left to do. One of them is I just kind of want to soften up some of this color in here. So I'm going to go back to my E13. So this was the color I used before my last layer. And I'm just going to soften this up. If you like the kind of more chunky, piecey look to the hair, I would just leave it as it was before. I just find, this is Rapunzel and I'm kind of picturing some long, silky, smooth hair. So I kind of want to blend out some of these chunky lines just to give it that really smooth and silky appearance. Loving that highlight there. I'm going to leave most of that. And then just blending some of this out in here. And then I think I need a bit more color just around that back edge of that hairline there. Perfect. Okay. Last but not least, I'm going to take my darkest tone now. And this is my E17. And I'm going to use this one really sparingly. This is really just for shadows. Really light touch in here. This is such a beautiful color. I love this color. I use this one even when I'm doing redheads. It's a perfect warm shadow color. Creates lots of light and depth in the hair without it looking heavy and kind of worn down. I also find that my E17 doesn't get as tacky or sticky as my E18 does when I'm using it on top of some of my other browns. So we'll just go around her arm here. You can see I'm not even going everywhere that I went with my E15 and my E13, just in a few of the deeper and more intense spots. And just down here as well, right under here, under her arm. And then I think this section is behind her, so really shouldn't see much of a highlight back there. Oh, there we go. One little shadow here just to match the other one on her arm. And I think she's all set. So I hope you've enjoyed this little demonstration today of how I've gone about coloring Rapunzel's skin tone and hair. For more information about the stamp featured in this video, come visit us at craftingkimmystamps.com. Thanks for stopping by.